Chip Roy of Texas joins us right now. Congressman, how do you see things going right now? It sounded, and I missed that part of it, sir, where Kevin McCarthy is very optimistic a deal could be had and soon. Do you share that?
Well, Neil, great to be on. I was just a part of that press conference that you were just playing there, and the speaker just laid out the facts. Republicans have been the ones leading in the absence of leadership from the president, right? We've been over 3 months where we've been out there wanting to sit at the table, and it wasn't until this week that the president finally did what we all knew he would ultimately do. He's been trying to push a manufactured crisis. He's the one trying to say that there'll be default. He's literally the only one talking about default, he and the folks in his administration. We're the ones who passed a bill. Now it's the time for the president to do his job. The fact of the matter is, the default we should care about is defaulting on the American dream. And that's what this administration will do if they continue down this road, the perilous road of spending money that we do not have, as you know, and as you talk about a lot, driving up inflation, racking up debt, weakening the dollar, undermining our strength around the world, and importantly, funding the very bureaucracy and the tyranny that undermines our ability to produce wealth and economic growth, which we have seen littered throughout the federal government. We want to return the federal bureaucracy to pre-COVID levels. We want common sense spending at 2022 levels, which is what we were spending 5-6 months ago. The American people are with us. The president, I think, increasingly knows it. He's feeling pressure, and he needs to actually do his job rather than hopping on a plane and flying to Japan. Let me ask you about some drop-dead points, which there is no negotiating for you, Congressman. And I only mentioned that because Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, has said this work requirement for some of those receiving federal benefits, that's a non-starter for him. I don't know your reaction to that, but he's already laid that out there as a non-negotiable point. What are some of your non-negotiable points? Well, thanks for that. I mean, look, you heard the president say that he wouldn't accept work requirements of consequence. That pretty much sums up his entire administration, right? They just want something for show. I don't do the red line game, Neil. I think we need to look at this in its totality. And I mean that, actually. I don't think it's healthy for us to go out and say, well, Chip Roy's going to go declare this is the one thing. Because then you have 222 Republicans saying this is their one thing. We have to work together to come up with something that is actually something we can responsibly go to the American people, that will put us on a responsible fiscal path, end the insanity, stop the bureaucracy from undermining our way of life. And that means all of the provisions that we put in our bill, they were all there. They were purposeful. They were not political. They were purposeful. Work requirements, not expanding student loans to the detriment of the veteran who actually risked his life for those student loan benefits, right? Not, choosing and picking winners and losers and giving fat cat subsidies to a bunch of rich elitists so they can drive a Tesla instead of the hardworking, men and women in this country, blue collar workers, want to get in their pickup truck and go do their job for their families. We want to end this corporate cronyism culture, reduce the size of government, and actually carry this country forward without debt piling up around our kids. And I know that's a broad statement, Neil, but we got to look at the totality. I'm not going to nitpick this publicly, and try to negotiate against ourselves. Yeah, I just was going to try to embarrass you and then replay the tape later if something went amok. Yeah. But I'm kidding, Congressman. But I'm not kidding about something that President Trump was saying last week in this CNN interview, where he was talking about the possibility of default and seemed to welcome that. Now, it might have been a negotiating tactic on his part to put the fear of God into Democrats, maybe fellow Republicans. But what do you think of that, this idea that default should be considered, if that's what it comes to and the only way to move on some of these spending cuts? Well, let me answer it this way. The only one actually talking about default really is President Biden, at least in town. That's probably a pretty classic President Trump kind of rattle to push on the president to try to move things in that direction. But look, for me, I actually just think the X date, I'm not worried about going over the X date because we're not going to default on our debt. Everybody knows we have cash flow to cover our bond payments. It would be the president's choice or Yellen's choice to not actually cover our interest payments. We have enough cash to do that. No, you mentioned a profound point, as you often do. I mean, we're showing our debt to GDP right now, which is, in other words, we're spending 18% more than we're worth. But leaving that aside, one of the things that's been touched on is it's really in Treasury's control to actually deliver on that default. Not that it would be its fault, but that it will decide what bills get paid, and it will decide what to do with the limited funds it presumably might have at June 1st. And now even the administration seems to be saying, well, maybe it's not June 1st. Maybe it's a little further back.
Is that the thinking that that was an alarmist figure, that to your reckoning, it's more pushed back? It's more like late June, if not July.
Yes, and again, I go back to they want to manufacture this crisis to try to get leverage and try to scare the American people. But again, I go back to we are not going to default unless the president chooses to. In fact, we're not going to not be able to make payments for Social Security unless the president chooses to. By the way, we could do a quick reclamation of unobligated COVID funds. There's $50 billion, $60 billion sitting there if you need some more cash. There's COVID money flying throughout this economy. Why don't you go grab that back? There are lots of ways to manage through this while we negotiate.
I'm sorry, Congress. Would you then be open? There have been a couple of ideas expressed. Maybe push this back a little bit. Cooler heads prevailed. Push this back to September. Others have said use a 14th Amendment type thing where you recognize, the sovereignty of this country and the evilness of death, if you will. But what do you make of some of these aberrant solutions to get us past this?
Yeah, I mean, look, anything should be on the table so long as it's responsible. So if the president and, the speaker are sitting down and they say, well, we can't agree on a 1-year or 2-year deal, but we can agree on a 60-day extension for X, sure, I'll sit down. All of my colleagues will sit down. But Neil, here's the key point. There's going to be a price. There's going to be a cost to that. It's not going to be free. So we got to look at it dollar for dollar. You're going to raise the debt. What are we actually getting in return? Because the American people are tired of us just ratcheting up the credit card with no actual responsibility on the backside of that. So you want to do a short term? Come talk. But it's going to cost you, Mr. President. We're not doing anything that's going to be irresponsible and a blank check.
Got it. Chip Roy, Congressman of the beautiful state of Texas. Thank you, Congressman. Great seeing you again.
Thanks, Neil. God bless you.